Hello! Thank you so much for joining me for this art demo. My name is Raquel Blacken. I go by Raquel B across the internets. If you would like, comment, follow, all the YouTube things, I would appreciate it so much. I am an artist trying to make her way out in this little world. Um, so, the way I do my art is in multiple stages. Right now, it is in the sketch phase. I like to keep my sketches for my gouache paintings particularly loose and not too detailed because they're going to be covered up anyways. I'm really trying to get a brass tacks or an idea of what's going on with the image and the subject so I can just have kind of an idea of where to place the pigment. That's really it. Uh, when it comes to other mediums or other types of style or outcome, my intent with sketching will vary much, vastly. And now we're on the second phase, which is going to be adding the background. So for me, the background or this maybe could be considered an underpainting. Not really, because it's not going to lead too far away from here and it's not going to be too covered up. So on these images or this fish series, I'm really for the backgrounds not trying to denote or depict anything in particular. I'm trying to have interest that leads the eye across the page in a fun way. That would be different if I was trying to make an image where there was a scene and such that I would have to render and capture depth using my understanding of different rendering processes and theories about, foreground, middle ground, background, and all that jazz. We're not doing that here. We have a subject and a sea of color, like with shapes. Not even worried about it. All right, and so now we are on the third stage, which is me adding in the color of the subject here, of the main focus of this image, which is the goldfish. And I'm adding in, they're not technically color flats because even though I'm working in layers, it's not the same layering you would consider as you would be doing digitally. Because traditionally, when you put something on top of something else, you can't really keep it separate. They're going to become one. Unlike in digital art, where you can move your layers around, adjust them, change their opacity, change their hue, their color, temperature, all of that. It's not the same. We're doing traditional here. So I like to work in, and probably if you listen to me talk about my technique, I always say big, middle, small, or big, medium, small, and that runs the gamut. That kind of mentality runs the gamut through all of my process. So when I sketch the larger object or form first, the medium-sized things, then the details, right? So I draw the overall like the largeness of the fins and the largeness of the body, and then I add in the details of the contours to help me know where they are, then the eye and the mouth, so on and so forth. If I was going to make it a detailed drawing, and then would add in the textures of the scales and stuff. So it's the same principle here. I'm adding in as much paint as possible, considering what colors are going to be coming next in the future to cover the subject in paint, get paint down on the image. It doesn't have to be absolutely fine, like refined, but I'm trying to get that overall contour and shape of the image, like its silhouette concreted, while considering the different colors that I am using. So the paint that I am using here also is thicker. As you can see, the paper is drying because I do live in a dry climate and I have my space heater on because it's winter at the moment. Me recording and making this art. So I like to keep warm, keep my toesies warm. So it does make the air in my room dry or drier, and that is something you need to consider when you are working with a medium that is dependent upon the water, because it's all about controlling the wetness of your paints and its fluidity so that you can get the kind of textures and brushstrokes that you want. And I'm working thicker because unlike in that second stage when I was adding in the background where I made sure it was very wet and things spread to get those interesting blooms and textures, as you can see, as I've placed the pigment down, it has not spread. It has stayed where I put it. Point blank period. put the pigment down and it stays where I put it. And that's because it is a little bit thicker. Um, it's not as thick as it could be. I don't usually use paint straight out of the tube without any influence of water until I'm in those finer, minute details that need the ultimate amount of opacity. And we're not at that point yet. We're still blocking in the colors. When it comes to depicting or rendering these fins, I think, what is this, like my fourth? This is like the fourth one, maybe the fifth painting of me painting these goldfish and gouache. And I've discovered in this process that I like a certain amount of gradation from the tips of the fin, the tail of the fins, tail fin, and ones on the side. I don't know the anatomy of goldfish. I'm not looking it up. Could I? We're not doing it. Anyways, I like to go from the tips, like the lighter color to a mid color to a darker color around the base. And I'm not necessarily doing it in a way to show form, somewhat, but most of it is just that was the choice I made. So it kind of gives consistency throughout. I think you can tell where the fin starts versus ends when I do it in that way, and I think it just looks interesting. Ah, that's the choice I made. Because a lot of the references I'm using, they're all either one color tonally, like they're all gold, or they're all white with maybe some spots, or they're all like the fish itself is all black with maybe some form of spotting. But nah, I'm gonna have that gradation on all of the fins, whether it's the one on the back, the one on the sides, or its tail fin. Again, I'm not looking up this anatomy. I'm sorry, we're not doing it. I'm not. Okay. Anyways, I cracked myself up. Right now we're on, I guess, phase 2.2, 2.1, 2. I don't know. I know I'm now moved on to more medium detail. So I'm no longer trying to get in the mass. I'm moving into that medium sized detail, like getting, the edge of the eyelid, where the iris is, and then the edge of that. I call it a cheek. Again, I'm not looking up anatomy. It's a cheek. It's the cheek on the goldfish. They got cheeks. Okay. And so I'm trying to define that now, and that's a part of the medium detail. The finer detail I would consider is like the textures of the fins or the textures of the scale. So we are in medium detail territory. Woo-hoo. And I have made the paint not only a little bit thicker, I'm using less water, but I'm also making it darker. So I am only using 3 colors in this painting. That's the challenge I set myself just for fun. With all these paintings, was select 3 colors at random and then use them in a painting just to use up my paints. And so I am using more of that Aegean. I don't know how to say that. Aegean. I don't know. You read words and then you don't ever hear them pronounced, and you take your best guess. Okay. This is like, it's like when you read fantasy novels. It's like when you hear them out loud for the first time in an audiobook, and you're like, "Oh, that's how that's said." Like when I first read Dudley, I thought it was Doodley. I'm just calling myself out right now. But like, can you blame me? Look, so don't come at me for not pronouncing things correctly. Like I give it my best efforts. It's not that big a deal. You can just look it up. It's a color. It's a deep kind of richy, almost navy blue with a greenish like undertone. Come at me, bro. I don't know what you want from me. It's not getting any better than this. I come as you are, and this is me. Okay. But even right now, there in the reference there is a spot on this fish, or there's a few spots. So now I am working that in, and I'm also working in some of the thicker, like fin details, because I found when rendering fine details, it's easier to cut away. So like if I make like the stripes larger, to make them seem finer and thinner, I can go back in with a medium yellow that will slightly cover the thickness of that dark blue, and it will make the dark blue appear thinner and more fine. So that's another way I go about my rendering process. And another thing that I also like to consider, I think the term is brush economy. I have not gone to any formal art school, so I can be using terms loosey goosey and get them mixed up. I do my best, but it's where you try to just understand like how many brushstrokes you're using and other things like that. In my mind, I also try to consider for brush economy. I'm doing air quotes. Y'all can't see me. This is a narration. I'm doing them anyways. Feel it in your spirit. When I do brush economy, it's really me considering if I'm using this specific color of paint, where else can I use this paint on the image? That way I am not trying to switch like too much between colors needlessly, like in wasting paint. So if I'm using a dark blue, I'm going to try and use it everywhere it is applicable on the image. And then before I just try and like switch over to a different color. So that's why I'm kind of moving all over the page instead of like fully rendering out the face or the spots or the spine or the fin. I'm like, I'm going to use this dark blue up as much as I can, get this detail in, and then move on. That really just comes with experience and time too. It's like if you want to just work in one section and refine that detail and paint it out, and that's your rendering process, good for you. But for me, it's like if I get to a certain point where I know that this section no longer needs this dark blue and I need to layer other colors on top, but I still have a good amount of dark blue not only on my brush but within my palette on the side because I mixed it up. Instead of that, like letting it dry down and having to try to reconstitute it later, which it will. It's gouache. It's not acrylic gouache, which is a polymer that like dries down and doesn't re-wet. It's just gouache. So it's re-wettable. It is a water, like I said, medium that is good with water. You know, I could do that, or I could just use it where it's at the perfect consistency right now for its use and use it among the rest of the page. That's kind of all really it is. I might have described brush economy incorrectly. Who knows? I could look it up. Am I going to? It's no, I didn't look up fish anatomy. I'm not looking up brush economy. Look, we're just that's where I'm at right now. I'll probably look it up later and mention it later at another time. Who knows? But I think I'm kind of around the ballpark. We're in the area, you know. We're in the same sport at least, you know. I'm kind of it's feasible. It seems feasible. I don't know. Another thing I do want to point out as I'm painting and you see me painting is how I am fiddling around with my brush. That is on purpose. So the grip on my brush really is important. And I don't think a lot of people are cognizant of this. And I don't expect you to be when you're doing art, but I just notice it watching my own paintings. As you do the practices and the muscle memory of art, of painting, you refine and change your grip in such minute ways to get different marks on the page. It's very true. Like, and if you're conscious of it, you can make a considered effort to get better. So if I want really finer detail in a certain specific way, um, I will hold the brush lighter or farther away from the ferrule. But if I want more detail, I'll get like a little bit like and thicker. I'll get a little bit more choked up on it. It really just depends. Then also, I do use my other fingers to support my hand on the page. That's another thing that could be a problem with like smudging. You have to be aware of what part or portion of your painting is still wet before you place your hand on it. I haven't just put a whole like fingerprint on my page before. I know. It's devastating. It is truly devastating when you are working in like watercolor and you place your hand down in a part that is wet and you don't notice that it was, and you put your hand somewhere else in a different place, and it leaves a mark, like it leaves a beautiful smudge. It's not beautiful. It's so annoying. I've made myself irate. I've rage quit because I put like a smudge in the middle of a picture that I could not fix. 10 out of 10, don't recommend. So just be a little bit aware about that. Um, Luckily though, with this gouache, it dries pretty fast, so I don't have to worry about it too much. With that being said, we are at the halfway point of this video, so I gotta say, hey, like, comment, subscribe. I do appreciate the views. I would love to know if you guys like how long this video is. I could cut it down. Uh, I don't know if I could make them longer, honestly. I did edit out a lot of me doing color mixing because I couldn't capture it. But the process overall for me to complete this painting took at least 4 hours. But majority of that was a good chunk of that, honestly, was off camera and me mixing colors up in my palette to get the correct consistency. I am still trying to figure out how to get the correct angles to capture that while like capture my palette while also capturing me painting the actual canvas or like the page, the paper. It's kind of difficult for me and my setup and the space I have for this. So just let me know if that's something you'd be interested in, or if you have any comments about the length. I will say that I am not planning on including any kind of background music into these videos because of just I do not want to deal with copyright, and I also do not want to pay for licensing and all those different things. I can't afford it. I'm not in that stage right now. This may or may not change in the future, but for right now, what y'all getting is my voice and the art. I'm not dealing with trying to deal with copyright on YouTube. I'm just gonna make content with what I have available to me, which is my voice, my mind, and my phone. Like that's kind of where we're at. Oh, look at that. We're on the third phase, the more minor detail. um, because you can see here, I'm getting in the scales and the different textures now. We're getting this little guy to come to life. Um, and the way I depicted the scales is really just with multiple like strokes in the shape of a scale. I wasn't really outlining them, but using the different variations and like values of the colors to give the like impression of scales. My overall process for art is never is has has never been really a one-to-one try to do like hyper realistic thing. I guess is that impressionism? I don't I'm like this is I just try to depict it in a way that I feel satisfied by the end of it, if I'm going to be honest. I have also started adding the white into my color mixes. That's how we have gotten a little bit more opacity behind these yellows. You see here, when I'm placing this yellow down into the fin, it is actually covering, look at that, more yellow. Not, well, it is yellow, but it's more white within the color mix of the yellow. So it is covering over that opaquely what was there before. So before you could really see through the background through like the tail fin, and I am covering it up. Not fully, I'm not trying to flat it out because that is a part of me gaining that texture, right? So I'm trying to add I guess the lightness that I see when I look at goldfish fins. They seem so delicate and thin that they have a translucency to them, but they also have like a texture that looks like ribbing or ridging. And so to capture that, I'm adding in some opaque sections using a little bit more of a paler, opaquer yellow by mixing it with white. Because that, I keep saying yellow, but technically it's like saffron orange. Bitch, I call this yellow. Like, Which is call it spade. My brain said yellow. It's yellow. Could it be considered an orange according to its label? Yes, but there's also the nomenclature or how colors are named, especially in watercolor. Wild. Like there's like quinacridone red blue shade. You're like, excuse me, ma'am. But they're really just hinting at whether or not the odor tones are cool or not, or warm or not. It's a whole thing. So half the time I'm just like, let me just swatch this real quick. What does this look like to me? Do I like the way it looks? Am I gonna use it in this? Then I'll use it. Like, um, that is one of my number one recommendations. If you are getting started, if any kind of paint or painting any kind of subject matter, I highly recommend that you swatch the color separately. Like, make a little swatch card with squares labeling each color, and then you can see what it looks like outside of the tube on paper. So that way you can reference it when you're choosing and selecting colors to use in your paintings versus trying to go off of the color that's on the tube or the packaging. Because I'm not saying that they are like completely off and not applicable, but I find that it doesn't have the richness or the wholeness like the swatches on the packaging do not compare in real life of the richness that you would get if you swatched it. It's very much like Splenda versus sugar. It's like the packaging is like, it's sweet, it's Splenda, but like if you want to see the like get the full taste, you're gonna have to do a swatch. I don't know how that was the most random analogy. I don't know why my brain went. I don't know. At this point in the painting, I'm at the stage of where I want to say fiddling. I don't noodle. Okay. If you noodle on something, that means you're just keep making marks to make a mark versus just being done with the image. I'm not necessarily done with the image at this point. I'm trying to finesse certain edges and certain like contours of shapes within the image to get them to sit where I want. It's not noodling, okay? I promise. It's trying to get like the refined smoothness of these edges so that they're distinct from each other in a very, very specific way. Okay? It's not noodling, I promise. I promise. Because you don't want to noodle. Because it gets to a certain point, if you noodle too much or you're fiddling too much, which can then turn into noodling, you can overwork your image or you can overwork the page. We don't want that. We don't want overworking. And I at this point decided that there wasn't enough just that sharp again, it's yellow. Says saffron orange, it's yellow to me. We're calling it yellow. I didn't think there was enough of that sharp yellow in there. So this is purely paint out of the tube now because I wanted that sharpness of yellow kind of in the page instead of it kind of being weakly, like kind of meek in certain spots. I was like, no, let's give a little bit more sharpness to it. And this just goes to show that that yellow, even straight out of the tube, it's not as opaque as the other colors. It's just not as strong. And that tends to be what happens with yellows I have found across the board. No matter how expensive they are, the yellow is always just kind of a weaker color. No matter the brand or the quality or the grading, the yellows just tend to be a little bit like a little limp. So you have to boost them considerably with color mixes or just considering the paints around them or keeping that section clear until you paint it with yellow or a bright color. Still noodling. Excuse me. Still fiddling. Yeah, I am because I'm getting in that depth once again because some of the opacity did flatten out the tail here, so I'm adding it back in with that pure yellow color. It's still on my brush and it's adding some more texture to it and adding it to both the tail fin and making sure that it is balanced between the tail fin, the top fin, and the side fins. I don't know that I still haven't looked it up. I'm not doing it. And also making sure that bottom lip is pretty strong. I think I did not intend to have this fish have this expression, but it just does, and it feels like he's like, huh, like he caught you caught him doing something he wasn't supposed to or something. I don't know. I think he's kind of cute. He's like surprised. I'm startled. Like it just very much that energy, and I'm here for it. What? Oh, right now I'm doing the finally. We're gonna go into the background and make some of those abstract shapes or marks in the background, and they serve a purpose in two ways for me. It adds interest to the background, but also helps reinforce the contours of the subject of this fish, right? So I then switch my brush between the round and a flat because the round is good for like points or kind of like that pencil marking. But the flats, especially for these large spaces, just works better to get an even coating of color. And this is a mix of the Aegean with the yellow just to get a kind of even mix. I find when I'm using or not using, I find when I am making these background abstract shapes or marks, I try to use up all of the paint within my palette just so that it doesn't go to waste. And then it's already in, the subject in the image. So it just kind of works out to bring out some of the color that's already within the subject to the rest of the page. And I had started in the beginning with this idea of having a lot of the energy rush at this diagonal. That's why when I put in the first color charges or that lighter, more loose background, kind of at that angle with this intent. And I go in making the marks. How I make these marks or decide their placement isn't planned. It's very spontaneous. I am looking at the page and its overall composition and looking at how much room is left in the page or like empty space versus not, what color is where, and then looking at how I could balance it in an interesting way. It's really just an exercise of me following my intuition around design and overlaying. So, like, I start with the green and then I add in the blue stripes and then I add in these yellow kind of rectangles that kind of give this, not, I don't know, flow to it. And then I had to go back in because I felt the eye was a little bit dull. So I kind of zhushed that bad boy up. And the eye was dull because of the paint itself. Again, it's that pearl cerulean, and the pearl cerulean is not super opaque. I swear it's a topper. It's a topper gouache. It's like a thing you just put on, just like a glaze over to give it shininess. Like it's blue shininess. And this color right here is the pearl cerulean mixed with white. It's like a 1-to-1 ratio. And that's why it looks so opaque. It's not because it's pearl cerulean. No, 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 no. That's because it's the white I'm using. The paint I am using is Arteza Gouache. I got it a set of 60. It did not cost me more than, I want to say, $50 from Amazon. Um, but the white I'm using is a designer wash by Winsor & Newton, and that one tube I think cost me $13, but it was worth it. I didn't end up, not saying I didn't end up to. No, 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 no. My camera just stopped recording. So I lost the sauce for the rest of these marks. But it was really me trying to balance out the page. So after I did the diagonals and the different shapes, I felt like it was a little bit off balance and it felt kind of center heavy, which is a weird thing to say out loud. So I added stuff on the side to say, like, hey, over here. Like, not too much over here, but like a whisper of, hey, over here. um, And now I am going in with the final layers of just pure white and treating it like an accent or like a pure highlight, which gives that the sharpness of an outline, but because it's white and not black, it's starkness in a different way that just leads better with the page, because I even didn't go too opaque. So this overall image is not too dark because I didn't use any black, and then I didn't completely cover all of the white within the paper or the page. So if I would have outlined this in black, it would have felt a lot more stark versus using the white. And I think the white just lifts it a little bit more, and it makes some of the stuff, I guess, a little more crispy in the edge, which is what I like, but not too much. And then adding a little bit of highlight on that eye to brighten it up, just overall. So I'm going over the major parts. I'm not outlining every single portion of this fish, because that would then make it too busy and take away from its starkness, right? Because everything is within relation to each other. So if I just have it on certain points, like on the edges of the fins, on the eye, and like on the mouth, it does give it some oomph in a nice way. So that's why I like to go in with the white on the end and help just boost the form and the overall textures that are going in. And I am doing this with a round brush. Most of this painting, I do it with this size, I want to say either a 6 or an 8 round brush, synthetic. And I don't know what brand it is. I got it in a kit from somewhere. I don't know. But it has such a fine point that I am able to go from like completely thick lines to thin pull out because of how I can hold it. Look at that. Ooh, just look at that. Ooh, so smooth, so crispy. Look at those lines. And I wanted to just add some stripes, some white stripes. At this point, the paint has been thinned out by water a bit, so they're not super stark white when I put them against these shapes here, but they're noticeable. It's like a subtle homage. And now we are coming to the end. I am doing my signature. This is how I sign it in paint. With Kelly B with the date. It's a quote unquote artist stamp, if you will, or a tag, but I paint everyone. I don't have a stamp that puts this on things. I could make one. I'm not going to. I like painting it. I like this part of the process, so I just do it every time. And I put the date. So I really do appreciate y'all joining me for this video. Again, like, comment, subscribe. If you have any suggestions for any future videos, let me know.